Well, hey friends, welcome back to the Pressing On podcast. I'm your host, Richie Reeder, and today you are in for a treat as we welcome one of the most influential pediatric transplant surgeons in the world to the podcast, Dr. George Mazariegos. Dr. George is the chief of Pediatric Transplantation at UPMC Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, the Hillman Center for Pediatric Transplantation, and at the Thomas E. Starzl Transplant Institute. He's a professor here at the University of Pittsburgh in the departments of surgery, anesthesiology, and critical care medicine. He and his colleagues founded the Starzl Network for Excellence in Pediatric Transplantation, where he serves as chairman and leads the network's overall efforts. Dr. George is not only a well-respected surgeon and a leading voice in the pediatric transplant community, but he's also a humble servant leader. I've seen him lead under pressure up close and personal in the hospital, and let me tell you, this guy is the real deal. In this episode, Dr. Mazariegos shares about his time training under Dr. Thomas Starzl, who's known as the father of transplantation, and how their current transplant care in Pittsburgh reflects a commitment to the patient for a lifetime. He shares about the Starzl Network and how their transplant processes here in Pittsburgh have influenced other centers throughout the country and all around the world. You might even hear some amazing futuristic comments about robotic surgery. But most importantly, having participated in and performed over 1,000 transplants, Dr. George gives some specific insight and encouragement to families that desire to press on and persevere well on the transplant journey. He opens up about the role that his family and faith play in his leadership as a surgeon, and I think your heart will be touched in a very special way during this conversation. Let's dive into episode 11 with Dr. George Mazariegos. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back into the Pressing On podcast. I'm your host, Richie Reeder, and today we are in for a treat. We're visiting with Dr. George Mazariegos, who's a leading voice in the pediatric transplant community, and I know you're going to love this episode. But Dr. George, thanks so much for diving in and having this conversation with us today.
It's really exciting to be here, Mr. Reeder. It's fantastic to join your listeners and to get a chance to have a good conversation.
I appreciate you taking time to join us. I know that you're a busy guy. Just for our listeners, to give a little bit of background on Dr. George, he's the chief of pediatric transplantation at UPMC Children's Hospital Pittsburgh and also a professor here in the city of Pittsburgh at the University of Pittsburgh in the departments of surgery, anesthesiology, and critical care medicine. He and his colleagues have founded the Starzl Network for Excellence in Pediatric Transplantation, where he serves as chairman as well. So we're going to dive into a little bit of his background and some things that he's seeing in the transplant community. And so, Dr. George, we really appreciate you taking time today. And first, personally, I want to say thank you. Because of you and because of your team, my little Micah Joy, who many of our listeners have known about her liver transplant, she's at home, she's stable, she's thriving, she's living her best life. And because of your care and your team's care in her liver transplant, we're now able to go out and bless other families through the nonprofit organization that we founded and Pressing On. So you're a really huge part of our family story. And I just wanted to start out by saying thank you.
You're so welcome. It's an honor to be part of her wonderful story and all that is before her.
Well, here's a question that just popped into my mind. When you think about your road of performing pediatric transplant, do you have a number in your mind of these are how many pediatric transplants that I've been a part of in my career?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been about 1,000 transplants
Wow.
that I've had the privilege to take care of, participate, perform, or lead. We've actually done the most pediatric liver transplants in the nation, as you may know, and that
Yes.
number beginning in about the 80s, in the early 80s, is at about 13 to 1,400 right now, but I've been privileged to participate or lead about 1,000 of those.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to come back to the topic of transplant surgery here in a moment,
Yeah.
but let's begin with getting to know you personally and as a professional, like in your training, in your education. I know that you spent time in Chicago and Michigan, here in Pittsburgh. As you look back on your degree programs and your training, how did those early years in education shape you personally and professionally?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I feel like I need to start really with talking about my family and the opportunities that they provided for me. I don't think we've ever chatted about this, but my parents immigrated from Mexico
Wow.
in the mid to late 50s, and they actually met in the United States, in Chicago, when they were taking night school to learn English.
Wow.
So the story goes that the teacher asked my dad to take my mom home because it wasn't the safest neighborhood, and
Okay.
that sort of started the story there, and they married in the late 50s in Chicago, in the Hispanic part of town called Pilsen.
Okay.
And then I was born. My sister and I were grew up in Chicago, in a very mixed neighborhood of very Hispanic, European, um, uh, South American immigrants as well. And so I think part of part of that growing up period for me was the real multicultural environment. Not the greatest neighborhood in Chicago,
Hmm.
but within those factors, I think just a good community of people and families who really did care for their families or kids and wanted to give them a good opportunity. Neither my parents had graduated from high school,
Okay.
and so they came to the States and for work opportunities during that time that were possible, and then became citizens later in life here in Chicago. But I think they really encouraged both my sister and I to pursue as much education as we could. They sacrificed so that we could go to the Catholic schools in our neighborhood as opposed to the less maybe the less safe public schools that were around us, and encouraged us to kind of pursue whatever opportunities might come for us without really ever putting any real pressure. It was just more of the opportunity for
Wow.
us, and so that that set the stage for for both my sister and I to go to Northwestern University, which was in our city there in Chicago, and that's where I started kind of my journey in education
Hmm.
in the 80s.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit of that background
Yeah,
and story about your
yeah.
family because that I'm sure left a huge influence on your life. I love how you said how they encouraged that opportunity without putting pressure on you. I'm
Mhm.
curious, when did the thought of pursuing a career in medicine first occur to you? Was it before Northwestern, while you were there? What did that look like for you to pursue, the field of medicine and healthcare?
Yeah, thank you. It really began at an early age for me, and I don't know why, except that I believe that God just planted kind of a seed of interest in me and a desire to pursue that. But I recall from my grade school days that I felt like I wanted to be, or I should be, a doctor in some
Hmm.
capacity. And again, we didn't have any real contact with folks in the profession. I did do some volunteering when I was in grade school and in high school at a local hospital. And I really felt at that time in a very vague way that I think the combination both of serving people and being involved in a field that really was growing and technologically scientifically was stimulating was the right fit for me. I think that the opportunity to work with and care for other people was a invigorating one even when I was little, but I didn't know really the specifics. In high school, though, I did apply for a unique program that isn't very common in the States, where you could apply for college and medical school education in one program, and
Oh, wow.
only Northwestern and I think at that time Boston had this combined program for those that really felt that that was to be their path. And so out of high school, I applied for this. I really feel it was when I look at the other classmates in my class, I feel like I had no place being among some of these really um, driven or talented folks who had been planning for this for years, and they had grown up. This was their, and I literally just heard about the program. I applied for it, and was accepted, and that really led the path, at least to go to medical school,
Hmm.
right out of after a couple years of college. So it was a shortened college program in Chicago, and then 4 years of medical school.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for filling that in. You're very modest for sure, but your path took you from Northwestern to Michigan State to
Yeah,
Pittsburgh, and somewhere along the line there, transplant started to creep into your career path.
yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about, those experiences, what led you to Pittsburgh, and then how transplant became a part of your vocation.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think um, when I was at Northwestern, in college, and then early in medical school, I think it was an important time for me, to grow academically and professionally, but also to grow personally in my faith. And so it was in college that faith in God and Jesus really became more personal to me. And so
Hmm.
that also factored in my life, because I started to kind of ask those questions about, what does God want me to do, or what
Sure.
should I, what I sort of understood better in college, and in those early part of medical school, that God had put together a purpose for me and for others in our world, and so we needed to kind of work within that. And so um, that really helped me to surround myself with some good friends who were, you know, pursuing, similar types of paths, and also
Hmm.
just to kind of try to, try to become more grounded in things that wouldn't change with, with stress, or with challenges down the road. And so to try to understand that, in that if God is really true, and if He's really working in your life, then you have some resources that you want to, to
Absolutely.
really utilize that. And so that helped me. I started to, to just read the Bible as much as I could, and try to follow Jesus more daily. And I think one of the passages, when I was reading through the New Testament, there was a scripture that came important to me, from First Thessalonians, that
Hmm.
was a scripture saying, to make it your ambition to work with your hands, so that your life could win the respect of outsiders, and that you wouldn't be dependent on anyone. And that was sort of a passage that had meaning for me as I was
Hmm.
trying to discern what I should do. I think I did not believe that I could that I was meant to be a surgeon early on in medicine. It was more of a evolution of trying to think, where could I, within medicine, make the most impact for people. And even though I was not naturally, say, inclined to be a surgeon, I thought I'd be more in the family practice or internal medicine kind of
Hmm.
realm. Those types I guess, callings, or voices, sort of, from God, helped me to consider that. And when I did my rotation as a medical student in surgery, which I was really doing really to get out of the way, because it was a hard rotation, I knew it'd be difficult, but it was going to prepare me, for internal medicine, or another field that I wanted to do. I
Hmm.
really fell in love with surgery, actually. uh,
Wow.
and uh, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I've read the scriptures. I really enjoy this, and could it be that, I should do surgery? And so out of Northwestern, then I applied for general surgical training, and ended up doing that in Grand Rapids and at the Michigan State program. Um, and of course, it was very early in those in the late '80s. Transplant was really just developing, and was only happening in a couple of cities in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, and so we had a requirement to do transplant, but that meant we had to go somewhere, because it wasn't happening in Michigan at all,
Hmm.
and nor in Chicago. So I could only go to either Pittsburgh or Minnesota at the time, and we had some connections through our hospital in Pittsburgh. And so in 1989, I did a 1 month rotation with Dr. Starzl, and the team that was relatively new at the time. They had just Dr. Starzl, as you recall, had just
Hmm.
arrived in Pittsburgh in
Sure.
1981, and in 1989 was actually the year that one of the immunosuppressants that became very really revolutionized the field. We called it, used to be called FK506. Now it's called tacrolimus, as you
Sure.
know. And
Yeah.
that drug was really brought to Pittsburgh by Dr. Starzl.
Hmm.
And so it really revolutionized the field. And that's one of the developments that along with Dr. Starzl, and we'll probably talk about him a little bit
Yeah.
later. But I think that really dramatically propelled the field forward. And so it was in March of '89 that I came to Pittsburgh for my rotation in transplant, and truly remarkable opportunity to see what was happening in the field,
Hmm.
and again to where that might be a fit for me.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a marvelous journey. And just for our listeners online, for those that might not be familiar with the history of pediatric transplant, Dr. Thomas Starzl is known as the father of transplantation, who performed the first successful liver transplant in 1967. And as Dr. George just shared, it was his team right here in Pittsburgh that made liver transplant routine. You talked about your 1 month rotation with Dr. Starzl back in the late
Mhm.
80s. I remember you sharing a little bit about his impact on your life when the Burden of Genius film debuted at the Carnegie Science Center here several years
Mhm.
back. But
Yeah.
share a little bit with our audience about your relationship with him and maybe some key takeaways in the field of transplant that you learned from Dr. Starzl.
Yeah, it's a great honor to talk about Dr. Starzl, and um, he really, to me, demonstrates, I think, one of your a key, key topics for pressing on that is perseverance. I think there is no one that I knew who embodied perseverance more than Dr. Starzl,
Hmm.
and it really required almost the amazing difficulties that he encountered in the 60s and 70s. I think that laid the groundwork for some of the successes that came later. And I certainly knew him through very challenging and busy times in the late 80s, early 90s, as he was developing and really working out some of the techniques and problems, both surgically and medically, that affected the field. But it was nothing compared to some of the challenges, obstacles, and barriers that I can only imagine, or I've only read about, that happened
Mm.
after the very, very difficult start to transplant, where children weren't routinely, surviving,
Right.
and there were many institutional or other questions that came up about whether this should even be allowed.
Hmm.
And so, but certainly, I think in the other things I really enjoyed about Dr. Starzl, besides his technique and his masterful approaches to surgery, which really became an important part of any teams that we wanted to emulate, as that
Sure.
kind of technical start, was also his awareness of people and his ability to understand how to put a team together, as
Mm.
well as the strengths and weaknesses of individuals, and the critical importance of always telling the truth. So I think I appreciated that Dr. Starzl didn't want to be told what he wanted to hear.
Mm.
He wanted to be told the truth, and that's not always common. I've seen other examples of leaders, et cetera, who
Wow.
don't always ask for the truth, I think, or not. And I think Dr. Starzl really emphasized truth telling in that regard, and it has stuck with me over the
Mm.
years. And I had the chance to really work closely with him once I became a fellow and a staff member, and then even after his retirement from clinical surgery, we were closely working on research opportunities and other initiatives. And so it was fun to be able to really get to know him until for many years, until he passed about 5 years ago.
I appreciate you sharing a little bit about his life and, that perseverance aspect and the truth telling aspect. That's definitely going to stick with me.
Hey friends, I'm Reagan Reeder, co-founder of Pressing On, and I love providing leadership to the organization as we uplift, resource, and coach hospitalized families, many of whom are on the journey of pediatric transplant. This season of the Pressing On podcast is sponsored by our friends at CODA, the Children's Organ Transplant Association. You can look them up online at coda.org. CODA helps children and young adults who need a life-saving transplant by providing fundraising assistance and family support. They're the trusted leader in supporting transplant families financially for a lifetime. CODA has helped raise more than $125 million for transplant-related expenses since 1986 and have seen approximately 2,400 CODA patients transplanted successfully. CODA is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so funds raised to help meet the needs of transplant patients are not considered income for families, and CODA's services are provided at no charge to transplant families. As the mom of a transplant recipient, I'd highly recommend their services because I've seen firsthand how CODA's compassionate care and financial guidance has helped our family since my daughter's transplant before, during, and after her transplant in 2017. For more information on how CODA might assist your family financially on the transplant journey, head to coda.org. That's COTA.org.
I still remember when I first kind of stumbled upon Starzl types of resources when we knew that a transplant would probably be forthcoming for my daughter, and really just realized that in God's providence that we were living in the city that many know is kind of like the pediatric transplant capital of the world, in a
Right.
sense that so many families that we got to know were coming to Pittsburgh for expert care, that your team is carrying out, that Dr. Starzl founded. And I know, like, in watching videos of Dr. Starzl and hearing him talk about his journey, that his vision for transplant here in Pittsburgh wasn't just, to have a perfect technical outcome with the surgery, but that there would be long-term care for the patients. And you and your team are carrying that out today. But lasting influence, care, relationship, like that's not always common in a lot of different industries, let alone
No.
healthcare. Why is long-term care and follow-up so important for you and your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we learned was that, and it started with Dr. Starzl, was that his commitment was to the patient for hopefully a near normal lifetime,
Hmm.
and that influence or the impact of the team began before and during and immediately after surgery, but that it didn't end there, and in order to demonstrate, in order to achieve the long-term outcomes that were really what the children were were made for, that it would require ongoing care by the team who knew them best, and that was really the surgical team, and it has been an important concept that the hospital here in Pittsburgh Children's Hospital has continued to support. We continue to see patients, for hopefully a couple decades before they grow and become adults and transition to our adult team, or adult teams back where they are from. But I believe that it's part of the reason that the outcomes are such as they are, and that's because we continue to see them. We understand that the implications of immunosuppression medicines that they're on and other implications of their care that are best seen through a long-term lens. And I distinctly remember Dr. Starzl. He would come to my office and throw down a report that would show the 3-year outcomes of a program, and he would say,
Hmm.
"This is ridiculous. Who cares about 1 and 3 year outcomes?" And then he would say, "What are your 20-year outcomes, George?" And
Wow.
he would know that we would be following those. And what are your
Hmm.
20 and 30-year outcomes? And he was asking that question, decades before others were. There's a recent report that now is showing estimated 30-year outcomes, really being exceptional for children who are
Hmm.
transplanted in the last decade, where they can expect, 80% survival for 30 years. It just
Wow.
came out a year ago. But this was the question that like Starzl was asking, in the 90s and early 2000s when he would come into our office and just really demonstrate that long-term view.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that commitment for a lifetime that's a big commitment for sure.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you and your team, carrying that out. There were many times that you or someone on your team would walk into, our room at the hospital and walk out, and my wife and I would go, wow, like they're the real deal. Like Reagan and I have commented several times that, you, the transplant team at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, not only world-class surgeons, but excellent bedside manner, truth tellers that are like, hey, here's exactly what's happening today. Here's our plan for tomorrow. But we never felt like the team was beating around the bush. Yet at the same time, too, we felt the kindness and care of the team. Where does that personal touch for you come from as a surgeon?
Yeah. I think that personal touch comes from different sources for different parts of our team. I think one of our universal, I think, factors though for the team members, nurses, the physicians, and the surgeons that I work with is that for the most part, they're not afraid. We're not afraid to enter into the the children's the families' lives,
Hmm.
and although sometimes we would hear the counsel, from the medical community about, don't get involved, don't get emotionally involved, um, that because of the potential stress or impact on the provider or the clinician, it hasn't been our practice to do so, and I think we encourage one another to feel and to try to put ourselves in their shoes, and I think that is a common attribute, I believe, about the majority of our team. Um, and there's another, I think, and for me personally, I think again, just realizing that God has called me to do this is important to be able to ask God for help, in doing that, and also to during the difficulties of that or during the challenges of that, to realize that God is allowing me and giving me the strength to do that, and that is a huge part of why we are able to, I think, um, put ourselves in the patient's shoes as much as we can, and we have a
Hmm.
saying, and I think it's true. We have the honor of trying to care for your child as if he or she was our own,
Hmm.
and that I think I believe that kind of when we say that and when we try to carry that out, I think that has enabled us to really uh, do that and to authentically, we're going to try to do the best as if it was our child. We're going to share the information that we would want to know. We're going to
Right.
try to do the care and options that we would want presented, whatever those are.
We have the honor of caring for your child as if he or she is our own. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I really appreciate you pulling back the curtain, on your faith, on your family, and your personal life, not just pat answers professionally. This is a very fruitful conversation. So thank you.
So
Um, you
welcome.
know, you and your colleagues founded the Starzl Network for Excellence in Pediatric Transplantation that has been a benefit to our family, many families in Pittsburgh, certainly many families all throughout the U.S. But it's a consortium bringing innovation and tech partners together with patients, with families, with transplant centers to transform outcomes in children undergoing transplantation. When you reflect on your work within the network of where you've been, where it's at now, and where you're going, what are some of the things that you're most proud of thus far within the Starzl network?
Thank you for that question. I'm really proud that we have been able to put the patient and family at the center of progress and at the center of the need and the urgency for why we're doing this. I think um, it is important for us, if we're going to make progress in the field,
Hmm.
to really think about how do we take the information that Dr. Starzl developed years ago that we're doing here in Pittsburgh or in other sites? How do we take that and really apply it so that every child, every adult, every patient has the benefit of that, and to do so with urgency? I think that one of the key lessons in the Starzl Network has been a couple. One is that we really need to work together and to identify and own the gaps, the problems, the inconsistencies of cross care that exist in the United States, much less, not even talking about the world, but really talking about within the United States. There's tremendous variation in the outcomes of children, different practices that may impact children. And if we don't, we can't make progress just by looking at our own center and working within our own institution. We have the responsibility, I believe, to improve care for all children in the United States and hopefully the world. And the Starzl Network is ambitiously, but I think rightly, trying to focus on that by committing. We're going to share our results with each other. We're not going to compete on keeping our protocols. We're actually going to share our protocols, and we're going to acknowledge where we can improve, and we're going to go where other centers perhaps haven't gone, because we acknowledge that children deserve it. That again, that it's the children at these centers that need us to work together. And I think it's been wonderful for patients and families like yourself and others who are across. Each network has patients and families that are representing their voice, contributing to educational materials and speaking up, participating on calls. And within just the 5 years that we've been working on this, I'm really proud of how we've made a space where patients and families can contribute and can be not just on the sidelines, but really they drive what the projects or what the priorities are of the network.
I appreciate you sharing, about that. If you're listening to the podcast right now and you're not familiar with the Starzl Network, and whether you or someone is on the journey of transplant before, during, or after, we'll link to the website in the show notes, because Dr. George, this isn't like just 2 or 3 centers. I mean, this has grown tremendously. I don't know if you know off the top of your head how many centers are included in the Starzl Network at all?
Yes, we have 16 centers in North America, 15 in the United States, and 1 in Canada. We've actually just put out a call for new centers that was completed this week, and we have now applications from programs across the states. So 7 more in the United States, and actually 1 in Japan that we're excited about considering and bringing together as the Starzl Network can be increasing global impact. Lots of challenges, opportunities with that, but it is growing. Currently, those 16 sites account for more than 50% of the transplants, within the United States, and we're hoping that with a selective growing of the network, that we can impact 75 to 80% of the transplants in the United States.
That is amazing. Yeah, we'll link to the Starzl Network website in the show notes so that people can take a look at that and put it in our follow-up. You talked a little bit about your background, your family, your faith, your upbringing, your schooling. Philanthropy is something that's been important to you as well, especially in the area of transplant. You and your family have recently established the Mazariegos Family Endowment in honor of Thomas and Joy Starzl. Maybe share with us a little bit about why you're passionate about that project.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about giving opportunity for people to participate in it, in all that we're doing. And I think I found, as I'm sure that you have found as well, that people are looking for ways to give back, ways to be part of everything that is happening, and we often don't do enough to make it easy for people to do that. And so one of our families, commitments is to really honor the legacy of Dr. Starzl, and create a space where people can recognize that that they can be a big partner in what we're doing by giving to the endowment that will help to support the ongoing work of the Starzl Network initiatives. Although it's a modest fund right now, it is already producing some support for our teams. We have a couple of staff members that are being supported by the endowment, and it allows everyone to have from Pittsburgh, but also from around the country,
Mm-hmm.
to contribute to that and allow for some sustainable methods to continue the endowment. The Starzl Network Group, we began with a large, wonderful donation from a philanthropist, but our responsibility now is, how do we build on that through additional research grants,
Mm-hmm.
additional giving from a family and individual level, and our industry partners. Industry is also a part of trying to help bring back and give back to the patients as well. So this is part of our sustainability for the network that hopefully will continue into the next generations.
I appreciate you sharing about that. That is
Yeah.
so wonderful, and I
Yeah.
love that practice of giving back and serving others. Thanks for
Mhm.
being an example in that area.
Mhm.
Specifically in the world of transplant, like what are some things that you're seeing right now that as you look into the future that you're anticipating within the pediatric transplant community? Maybe some things, whether it's research or practice, that you're
Mhm.
excited about right now.
Yeah, I think there's three things that come to mind, uh, both from the practice point of view and some technology and some initiatives. I think from the practice point of view, we've mentioned it before, but the patient-centered outcomes and the patient-centered research is really, I believe, a rising force in medicine and in transplant. And so, what this means for the listener out there is that, typically you may be surprised, but typically research wasn't centered around what patients really desired or what
Hmm.
their outcomes mattered to them. It was based, and it traditionally has been based on, what do the clinicians feel are important outcomes. So, and some of these could be very easy to understand. We want livers to last a long time, and we want medicines to prevent
Sure.
rejection. But there are components of that we never would get if we didn't ask the patients what are the outcomes that matter the most to you. And they could say, well, this rejection is reducing rejection is great, but it would really matter to me most if I could reduce the frequency of my lab tests to
Hmm.
to every 6 months instead of every month or every 3 months. It would really matter to me if my kids could go to school faster, or
Hmm.
and these are rising up as being important to measure. They want to say, I want my kid to feel good about their scar. I want my child to feel good about getting their lines out. And so, the other day we just ran a meeting last week, and we asked patients, what would mean the most to you? What is your hope and hopes? What are your hopes and dreams? And the one
Sure.
child said, we were talking, some shared, I want to do this, I want to go to school. One child just shared, I really want my IV line to come out.
Hmm.
That's my hope and dream. And so when you hear that from your patient,
Wow.
that really drives you to say, we're going to work on that, because that's what matters the most to you. And so
Hmm.
patient reported, patient driven priorities, I think, are a rising element in care. I think we've seen some technology that's really dramatic. I think this is, for example, the ability to help, in my field, transplant organs be able to last longer,
Hmm.
and in before they're transplanted. So coming across the country or being after the gift of donation, we have a certain time period to place those organs in the recipient after the gift of life from a
Hmm.
family. There's some technology that's happening where through machine perfusion of these donated tissues, those organs can last 12, 24 or more hours than
Wow.
previously happening. And so that is something, it's mostly been applied in the adult population right now. But
Huh.
I think it's going to benefit all patients if we can really benefit from every wonderful donation and utilize that gift maximally. So help everybody to benefit, every donation to make a
Sure.
difference through technology. That's been a big development just in the last couple of years. Um,
Wow.
and then I think the last thing is I think we will see an area of robotic surgery
Wow.
where using the guidance of our surgical experience with combining that with instrumentation that is driven by robotic technology.
Hmm.
Surgeon can control the instruments remotely. Right now, it's in the room, but not directly at the. There's a technician sort of helping
Hmm.
insert tools into the cavity of the abdomen, and the tools then work under the direction of the surgeon. Think about if we could do that, across longer distances, and bring ability to take expertise that may be rare and be able
Hmm.
to work across centers and helping patients who don't have access to it immediately, but to benefit from that. So I think it's an area that actually some of our international colleagues have been working on in Asia and in India um, faster than in the U.S. because
Wow.
of some constraints that they have, where they don't have deceased donation and they need to work on living donation, to a more significant degree. So those are kind of three developments that I think are really they're intertwined, but those
Yeah.
are very exciting.
The topic of robotic surgery, that was not on my bingo card today to discuss. I love it though. That's amazing. Probably not conversations that you were having with Dr. Starzl decades ago.
Exactly. No, they were not.
Hey everyone, I'm Olivia Reeder, and I love helping my parents serve hospitalized families through our Pressing On programs. Here at Pressing On, we're committed to meeting tangible needs, and we have various programs that help resource hospitalized families physically, emotionally, and spiritually, including our Hospital Care Package program, Transplant Backpack program, Gas Card program, Crisis Coaching program, and Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh program. So if you or a family you know is affected by a long-term hospitalization or is on the journey of pediatric transplant, we'd love to come alongside you with free resources during this time. Let me encourage you to visit our website at pressingon.org to sign up for our free resources or make a referral to one of our programs. Visit pressingon.org today. Thanks so much.
Well, I think that you're in a unique position in pediatric transplant where you've participated in and performed, like you said, 1,000 surgeries. It's just amazing. You've seen it all, with our organization and the theme of persevering. We want to encourage families to persevere emotionally, spiritually, physically, relationally, intellectually, in many different ways. We want them to develop holistically, and their character as they go through tough times in the hospital. You've been able to see maybe families that have persevered well in their transplant journey. And maybe, unfortunately, there's some that maybe haven't. But as you look at some key characteristics that maybe families that you've seen throughout your decades of practice, what are some of the common themes of families and individuals that you've seen that have persevered well on their journey of transplant?
Yeah, I think for those families that I've seen, and I have to admit, I have learned a lot about perseverance from the families that I've taken care of. I, I'm not the model always of perseverance. I would say some of the families that I've cared for are the models that I would aspire to. And so that's number one. I think just acknowledging some of the tremendous examples that I've been blessed to see. I think the characteristics that stand out to me, I think for the most part, I think that they recognize that they can't do this alone, so that
Mm,
they want to in ways that are are appropriate for them to really walk with someone on this journey. So
sure.
and to me, that could be, I've seen families they have a family member, a friend, a trusted person, or two that really, it could be their spouse or it could be another family member. Those that have had that, I think, have really demonstrated perseverance. But others have also looked, in when they haven't had that, haven't been afraid to reach out to, organizations like yours or others that now are available. And I think just to help people recognize that they're not alone.
Sure.
And I think that's been important. I think the two other things, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready to hop on the podcast, and I think the other things that stand out is I've always been impressed when the persevering family member, how they would, ask questions, and they would advocate for their loved one. They weren't afraid of advocating or asking questions, but they had this quality of focusing not so much on the problem that was at hand, but keeping the person, their loved one, as the focus. And it wasn't about, this is a bad problem, and it would be like, how can I help, Mary? How can I help John? How can
Sure.
or John wants this, and John is hoping for this. And so, and I think they demonstrated to me that, again, and for us, as we're sometimes we could have the tendency of thinking about the rejection or a complication, and they remind us that we need to widen our lens, so to speak, about, and it's the person in the community that they're living in, that that the successful, the persevering family, I think, just helps us to remember that. And I've been impressed with that aspect of these examples for me.
Well, what a great reminder of how none of us are meant to go through life alone. What a
Right.
great reminder of persevering well. Dr. George, we really appreciate you being on the podcast today. I have a couple last questions for you.
Sure.
But one of the things that we love to do with all of our guests is just to humanize them a little bit and get to know the person behind the professional, behind the family.
Yeah.
So if you're up for it, we have a couple of specific questions for you in our rapid fire round.
Let's go for it.
All right. So, Dr. George, what is your favorite dessert to indulge in?
You'll be shocked. I'm actually not a dessert person. If you ask me for my favorite food, though, tacos.
Okay.
100%, almost any time of the day.
Now, do you have a specific taco place in Pittsburgh that is like, this is my all-time favorite place?
I'm still looking for it, but
Okay.
I think I like streets. I like the street side, those street side tacos.
Yeah.
There's some Mexican food stores, Las Palmas, that I really do enjoy, actually, in Pittsburgh, with some of the street tacos that you can find there often. Yes.
Awesome. Do you have here's a second question, favorite movie of all time?
I have to give a shout out to my family. My wife, Becky, is my wonderful partner in life. And through her family, I've co-opted their favorite movie as now mine, which is It's a Wonderful Life. It's it's a tradition now.
Yeah.
They can quote. I can't quote the lines, but like they can. But it's been a tradition that we've adopted in our family, and has become my favorite movie.
That's wonderful. It's almost that time of year where that'll be on nonstop in our house. I love that. That's wonderful.
Exactly.
What is your favorite family activity to do together?
This may sound boring, but having everyone around the dinner table and having conversation around the dinner table, especially as our kids have gotten a little bit older, has really been a blessing to me. Just to hear where the conversation goes. If they stay a little bit longer, and a little bit longer than usual, and just linger at the dinner table, I'll take that every day. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. All right, two last rapid fire round questions. First one, what's your favorite thing about living in Pittsburgh?
I love the community of Pittsburgh and the neighborhoods of Pittsburgh,
Mm.
and just the fact that that I'm in the Oakland area, but I can be at the hospital quickly, but also be out and enjoying the city. We've always enjoyed the community in the neighborhoods, and being able to really move around in the city. And I'm coming from Chicago, which was a lovely town. I just the neighborhood feel and the ease of getting around and being with our family has always been a highlight of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, for those that are not local in Pittsburgh, it's the city of 250 neighborhoods, like Dr. George just talked about. So, Mr. Rogers and Won't You Be My Neighbor still having an impact today, that's for sure. So, last rapid fire round question, and we ask this to all of our guests on the podcast, and it's always a part that moves me greatly. But what does the word perseverance mean to you?
Wow, that's a good one. I think for me, it means to recognize that difficulties that come in my life aren't a random process. Trials or difficulties that we all experience, they
Mm-hmm.
actually have a purpose.
Mm.
I believe that will allow us to learn how to persevere. And that, I was I was trying to commend my son who's going through a hard time, and I said, I'm proud of your perseverance. I'm not happy you've had this trial, but it's actually going to produce something that's good. And so
Wow.
I think perseverance comes through difficulties, but it will be a good thing if we let it, and if we ask for help and we walk through it.
No, I love that. There's definitely purpose in our pain. I say all the time that, all of our obstacles are opportunities to grow. And I really feel that deeply. Thanks for sharing your version of perseverance there, Dr. George. In closing, one last question for our patients and families, those that may be on the journey of transplant before, during, after, any specific lasting closing advice that you would give to transplant parents as they navigate the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of transplant?
Yeah, I would say to those families, I think I would say it is a journey. We say that a lot, but it's I would say it is, because it is a journey and it is a long process. I think do the things that will really help you um, to be well through this process, to take care of yourselves, and to take care of each other. I think, it's a stress on families. And I say, I don't say this enough, but I think I want to tell families more, as to help care for your child, you need to take care of each other. And to do that, I think, recognize that will be a lasting benefit to your loved one, as you care for yourself and your family. And then I think, and that goes along with what we talked about before. You're not alone. Reach out and be authentic with how you feel, and hopefully your team will do the same. Don't be afraid to advocate. Just ask. I would say, ask, what would you do if this was your child? I think I tell that to families. I think they shouldn't be afraid to ask those hard questions to their care team. Doctor, tell me what you would do if this was your child, and tell me what I haven't asked that you think I should. And I think those are things that are part of the day to day, but look to the long term and walk together.
Absolutely. Well, really appreciate your encouragement and insight there, specifically for families that are on the journey of transplant. That's an inspiring word for them, for sure. If somebody's connecting with some of the things that you're sharing about pediatric transplant and wants to follow you, your team's work, whether it's a website, online, social media, what's the easiest way to follow you and your team these days?
Thank you. You can definitely follow me on X at CHP Transplant, and the Starzl Network's Twitter account is at Starzl T. Those are two of our X accounts or Twitter accounts, and then we try to keep things posted and up to date on our Starzl Network.org site.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. George, I just want to affirm you in the sense that you're making a tremendous difference. You've impacted me personally and our family professionally. Your humility, your care, your expertise. This has been a really fruitful interview, and I really appreciate you doing it.
You're so welcome. It was very encouraging and delightful for me to chat as well. Thank you.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Pressing On podcast. If you found this episode inspiring and helpful in your journey of perseverance, we appreciate you sharing it with others. A great way to support our work of serving hospitalized families is sharing the podcast with family and friends, posting about it on social media, or leaving us a rating and review. Don't forget to visit our website at pressingon.org for our free programs and resources for hospitalized families. Follow along the Pressing On journey on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Pressing On PGH. As we all press on through healthcare challenges, we need to stick together. Until next time, know that you are not alone. You are seen, valued, and loved. Keep pressing on.